Hello and welcome to another episode of Addicted to Business. Today it is my huge honor to have our first international guest on the show. All the way from Seattle, Washington, welcome Mr. Rand Fishkin.
Howdy gang, thanks for having me.
No problem at all. For those that don't know, Rand is CEO of a company called Toro. He's one of the most well-respected names in the world of digital, and we'll be hearing shortly all about his story. Of course, no show can start without an introduction to my good friend and co-host, Mr. Stokely Howard.
Oh, thank you for the kind intro, Nathan.
I couldn't forget that time. So, Rand, it's a huge honor to have you on the show. Thank you. I know a lot of people have been messaging me saying they're excited to hear you on the show. So the first question for me is perhaps to start with where it all began. And so I'm interested to know, after your kind of time at university, what happened from there? I know obviously a few people will know you from your time at Moz, but I'm interested to hear how it all started.
Yeah, let's see. So I guess it sort of started with a fight I had with my dad. So I'm one of those really lucky, privileged kids, you know, grew up sort of middle class in the United States at a time when that was still relatively common. And my parents paid for the first 2.5, 3 years. Yeah, 3 years of my college education, which was much cheaper back then, but still substantial, you know, probably $7,000, $8,000 a year. This is back in 98, 99, 2000. And then I had a blowout fight with my dad, and he threatened not to pay for college anymore. And I said, fine, don't pay. And so I went to work over a summer at a company called Wizards of the Coast, who makes this card game Pokemon.
Yep.
And at the time, these Pokemon, the little Pokemon cards were very hard to get outside of the Seattle area. And so my friend and I would buy them at employee discount and then sell them on Craigslist and eBay and like all over the web, right? And for a markup, and we made enough that I could cover my college tuition for the next, I think, 2 quarters. And I almost graduated. I think I was 2 classes away from graduating when I dropped out because I realized that I like doing internet stuff more than I liked going to college.
2 classes away.
Yeah, 2 classes, only 2 classes from a degree.
Wow.
But it was frustrating because it wasn't 1 quarter. I would have to take 1 class in 1 quarter and then wait over the summer and the next fall take the next class. Yeah. So it would have been like 9 months to take those 2 classes. But regardless, I started doing web design pretty much full time. And my mom was running a small business marketing consultancy, and her clients needed website work. And so that was my first gig. And when we ran out of money to be able to pay our SEO subcontractors, that's when I learned SEO and started the SEO Moz blog. And so that's how I got into that world back in the early 2000s.
Incredible.
I wanted to touch back on the university, I guess, dropout. Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
So I didn't go to university. I jumped straight into the world of work and never really believed in university. I mean, especially for my career, which is filming and picking up cameras and being creative. I didn't see I didn't see that as a necessity. And actually, I'd go and work. I started working in the television industry, and I'd be in the television industry for a year, and people would be coming out of uni, and I'd be training them to do their job. It was absolutely nuts. I couldn't see how it worked.
Right.
Yeah,
You're like, all right, college kid, come here. I'll show you how it's actually done.
You're 5 years older than me. You're way more hype.
But you don't know how this goes. Yeah.
But I think that the system is definitely designed to tailor people and to tailor most students towards university by default, than trying to go to work or getting stuck in and doing a job. What do you think about that?
I can't decide if the whole system, right, the sort of college university system is intentionally sort of designed to reward wealthy children, right, and sort of create a class difference, or whether it's an accidental byproduct of the history of how college and university works. I think it's somewhere in between, right? There's kind of an intentional, let's, make sure that mostly wealthy mostly white, and in the United States, white and Asian kids like sort of do well, and everybody else is left behind. I really dislike it. And at the same time, I have a very hard time when people ask me like, would you recommend dropping out of college? Would you recommend getting a degree? Would you recommend going? And I look at the statistics, right? And obviously, you know, the UK is very different from the US. Like, your healthcare system is massively better in a ton of ways, right? And it's not tied to your job. So there's a big difference there. But in the US, if you don't get a college degree, your survival, like your life survival and your health, are literally, you know, correlated with going to college and getting that degree. So, you know, I think college graduates like live an extra 8 or 9 years in the US on average, and
Wow.
they're much less likely to be obese. They're much less likely to suffer from diabetes. They're much less likely to have heart disease. Like, all sorts of just sort of, you know, positive life outcomes are correlated with it. And so it's really hard for me to argue, oh, don't go to college. I mean, I hope that our system like gets better for people who don't go to college, because in a way, I mean, it seems like bullshit, right? Like,
Yeah.
why?
Yep.
Why do you have to pay thousands of dollars to these higher education sort of systems and like fit into this niche? Like, Stokely, you're a great example. You have wonderful skills that people need, right? I dropped out of college and have apparently built a few businesses that do well. I don't know. Is it a requirement? It's frustrating to me, for sure.
Yeah, it's almost like the system's against you if you don't want to go to college in the US, and that's tough.
Yeah,
I don't think it's too dissimilar in the UK though, Stokely, in terms of there is a big thing about, okay, you finish school, you go to university. Once it was a real honor and a privilege to go to university, and it was a real achievement, but now it's become the norm. And actually, when you're looking through CVs, certainly for me now, when I'm recruiting, I'm looking for people that went outside of the box and did something else rather than just followed the norm. And, oh, you went to uni, you got your 2-1, very well done, now what?
Right. Yeah. So interesting semi coincidence. I just published a survey with a bunch of data about marketing professionals, right? So people in the world of digital marketing and web marketing, and 734 folks from mostly English language countries, so US, UK, Canada, Australia, answered. And I asked people specifically, how did you first get started in the marketing field? And the top answer with 40% of the respondents is self-taught with no formal marketing education or employer-provided training. And then the next response is 25% college university degree in marketing. So
there we are.
Same thing, right?
There we are. So, Rand, I see behind you, there's a book there called Lost and Found It.
Yeah.
That is the best product promotion I've ever seen. But essentially, I'm really keen to talk about that book, because in there you discuss around the typical kind of Silicon Valley wisdom, in inverted commas, and how it leads far too many startups kind of astray. Is that something you kind of wrote based on a previous experience, or what kind of caused the book to be written?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, Nathan. So basically, you know, over the course of Moz's history, I went from sort of a blogger to an SEO, and then became CEO of the company, raised several rounds of venture financing, I think totaling $29 million in venture that we raised, so a significant amount.
Yeah.
And then stepped down from the CEO role, promoted my longtime chief operating officer, and I stayed at the business for a few more years after that, and I think struggled very much with the concept, like the structure of venture, what it encourages, what it biases to, and who and how, all the kinds of things we were talking about with college too, right? So this, you know, the fundamental mechanics of venture is, you know, let's say Nathan, Stokely, the three of us start a venture fund, right? And we go to an LP, a limited partner, we raise, I don't know, let's say $300 million. That's a pretty average venture fund size, right? And then we're paid a percentage of that $300 million every year. And we're going to be wealthy. Like,
I was going to say, when are we starting? This sounds unbelievable.
oh, if you start a venture fund, right, with very rare exception, and if you're raising hundreds of millions of dollars, you are making bank, even if your venture fund is a complete failure, right? So you're making bank. Now, you also make a lot of money if you make some good bets, right? So we basically, the three of us, would go out, we'd try and find maybe 100 companies to invest in over the course of, say, 5 years or so. And over the next 7 to 15 years, after we make those investments, we would sort of hope that 95 of them approximately sort of die trying, right? Trying to become a billion-dollar unicorn. 2 or 3 of them return, significant amounts, maybe 3 to say 5, 7 times the money we put into them. And 1 or 2 make the whole portfolio, right? 1 or 2 are like those billion-dollar unicorns that return 10x, 20x, 30x, right? We put 5 million into them, they return 100 million to us.
Yeah.
That model works, right? It works for a very small number of people. It works for the 2 or 3, maybe 5 entrepreneurs who started those 5 companies that were winners. It works for some of the employees of those companies, at least the ones who joined early and were smart about how they negotiated their stock. It works for the 3 of us, and it works for our LPs. And it sucks for 95 entrepreneurs. It sucks for 95 teams. It sucks for 95 times however many hundreds or thousands of customers were customers of those companies, right? Because those companies sort of didn't work, fizzled out.
Yeah.
And creates, right? It reinforces I think the biggest problem in sort of Western democracies and economics right now, which is wealth inequality, right? So fundamentally, at like a macroeconomic level, at a socio-political level, and at a personal level for entrepreneurs, the venture model bites. Like, if you were to design something, and by the way, the only reason it exists is because of a tax loophole in the US tax code, right? So the tax loophole is that basically long-term in the 1960s and 70s, all these rich people lobbied the government for a, what's it called? They get the capital gains tax rate on their venture investments if they hold them longer than 5 years, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So the math of venture only works because of this tax loophole. If it feels like every system in our world is rigged, it's because it's kind of true. And so Lost and Founder is about a bunch of this stuff, right? It's about the experience of going through raising money and being excited about it and trying to build a business, and then having that business do extremely well for many years, but not quite well enough to become the billion-dollar unicorn. And how even in the case where Moz got to 50 million in revenue, it grew 100% year over year for 7 years. It was it's still profitable now, employs a couple hundred people, but other than the salary that I got while I worked there, it's not quite the lottery ticket that people think it is.
And Rand, did you get a lot of pushback or feedback on the book, or was it all fairly positive when it came out? Because it is an opinion that will polarize, right? For those that are making good money from it, will be like, "Shut up, Rand! What are you talking about?" Yeah.
No, for 100% for sure. No, you're exactly right. There's more than, I would say it's a small handful of people who are basically like, you will never be able to raise money again. And to which my response was, didn't you read the book? I don't want to, right? So this is a good bias. But that being said, yeah, I think there was a few bridges burned, and I was very transparent about some of the conflicts that happened at Moz, and obviously this is from my perspective. So I think if you were to ask other board members or Moz's CEO, she might say, well, Rand's perspective is, biased by his experience. And I'm sure it is. Yeah. But a lot of those later experiences were pretty negative. And I wrote about them very honestly, right? At least from my perspective, very honestly. And so I think that that's extremely unusual. Like most most startup founders, they want to make their companies look good. They want to make themselves look good. And Lost and Founder is kind of like, I'm an idiot, but you don't have to be.
Rand, I'm interested there that you said you wrote about those experiences, because a lot of people, when they're going through difficult times, will keep it to themselves as their mechanism of dealing with it. But for you, it sounds like your mechanism was to openly talk about it and share it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I find, I don't know if you guys have this experience, right? But like, my sense is that especially as men, right, we're sort of socialized to be tough, right? Yeah. That like being strong, being like a real man or whatever it is in quotes, right? That means you bottle up your feelings and you don't share openly how hard things are affecting you, and you sort of let it roll off your shoulders, right? And you don't show weakness. And and that is entirely backwards and wrong, right? Like the times when you are able to share experiences that have been really challenging for you and let your emotions out and have that catharsis that comes from sharing, and have the powerful personal connections that come from being open with people, right? One-on-one or in a small group. Those are life-changing, right? And transformative and really positive. And we are trained and socialized not to do them. And so for me, writing Lost and Founder and writing a lot of my blog posts, right, about, depression, about bankruptcy, about laying people off, all that type of stuff, like those experiences, sharing those experiences for me is getting that catharsis, right? It's being emotionally open with a large anonymous number of people.
So that's our first share, right? Is it's okay not to be okay, and it's also okay to talk about it and not put on macho bravado that you're a bloke and therefore you can't share your challenges.
I mean,
or a female. I guess many females would be in the same camp, right? That they are maybe it's just them in the family and they're the breadwinner and them to look after a family. Sometimes they feel like they can't share something because they need to hold it all together for their family that they're looking after, particularly the entrepreneurs and things like that. But actually, they also need to be able to talk about it as well.
Absolutely. I think this is just as bad, if not worse, for women, especially in the business world, right, who have to deal with kind of the pressure, the dual pressure of perception around, when women act like, tough guy men in business roles, they're perceived in a different way than men who do that.
Yeah.
And also if they act in more traditionally emotionally open ways that we associate with women, they're penalized for that, right? So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like, I don't want to pretend that it's good for anyone, but this is an environment that we have the power to change. We don't have to create a world like this, right? We can, like, our generation and the generations after us, they don't have to behave the way our parents and grandparents behaved. That's what I hope.
I think that's a fantastic point.
Wow, Rand. so much value that you're giving us and our listeners. It's great. You clearly are a serial entrepreneur, and after leaving Moz, you've gone on to set up Spark Toro, which is your next business. Tell us more about this company.
Yeah, sure. So I took an entire 12 hours off between the two companies, so I left.
Why? Did you not give yourself a year off?
No. Well, I mean, unfortunately, right, one of the weird realities is I didn't have the finances to take time off. Like, I had to get going right away, which is also sort of strange. Like, I think there's a bunch of people. I get emails all the time because if you start typing Rand Fishkin into Google, one of the first suggestions is net worth. And I really need to write an article with my actual net worth because the internet thinks I have way more money than I do. And
that's a good point, actually, Rand. Do you think a lot of people hear the Moz story and kind of have a misconception? They have no idea what actually went down, and like you say, you literally had to set up a company.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people who look at a company that's doing, $50 million a year in revenue, and like Rand owns 20% of it, and he was the CEO and the founder. Like, he must have at least a couple $1 million, right? Because Moz is profitable. It's kicking off a couple million every year. What's going on there, right? And the answer is, sorry, that's not reality, right? When you raise venture, until and unless you get to that exit, the stock is not, liquid.
Yeah.
Right. You can't sell it like you can sell stock on the stock market.
This is it. You've got a fortune on paper, if you like, but actually it means nothing until you then liquidize it. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, conceivably, right. If my net worth includes the, whatever taxed valuation of Moz's stock, then yeah, supposedly I have millions of dollars on paper.
Yeah,
I had ramen for dinner last night, guys. But so the Spark Toro, I'll give you a tiny bit of background, which was basically that my co-founder and I talked to a bunch of marketers and people in the market research world about this weird problem that we saw, and we're like, oh, that's a fascinating one. Let's dig in deeper, which was that essentially when a company wanted to learn more about its customers and potential customers, they would oftentimes run these big, large-scale surveys to try and figure out, like, what do my customers pay attention to? For example, what podcasts do they listen to? What YouTube channels do they watch and subscribe to? What social accounts do they follow and engage with? What websites and blogs and publications they read? Like all those kinds of questions, they would run surveys. And I don't know if you've seen the output of these surveys, but it's not great. And they're very expensive. Like we're talking tens of thousands of dollars to assemble a big panel, sort of, pay people a small amount to take these surveys, try and get the right group, try and get it all demographically sorted. And so they'd run them maybe once every year or two, pay $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 for these surveys. But we saw a few people who did it really smart. Rather than run surveys, they tried to get the actual data. So they would essentially cyber stalk all their customers at scale. And by cyber stalk, what I mean is like, Stokely, they'd go to your, go find your Twitter profile, go find your Facebook page if it's public, go find your LinkedIn page, go find your, Reddit profile, your YouTube profile, like anything they can connect up on the internet. And then they would crawl all of those, see everything that you follow, share, read, watch, talk about publicly, put it into a giant spreadsheet or database. And then it's not about analyzing you, right? But they want to find 500 people like you because you're their target customer, because you're in the videography, video business. And so they're like, okay, videographers in television, whatever, they pay attention to and read these sources on average, right? We got 500 in our database, 50 of them engaged with this publication. So we think this is a good publication to reach people like this. And we were like, oh, that is killer. That is a super smart methodology. And also you should not have to have your in-house software engineers building a system to do that. Let's just build it ourselves for the entire internet. Like we'll do it for everybody. And so that's what Spark Toro is. It's essentially a giant database of anonymized profiles, right? No personally identifiable information that you can search through and say, like, I want to know what architects in London, what podcasts they listen to. And I want to know what landscape designers in Edinburgh read and watch. And I want to know what people, chemical engineers in the UK subscribe to and what they follow on social. I want to know what Instagram profiles are well followed by people who are passionate about Lego, right?
Yep.
So like all that kind of stuff is what Spark Toro provides.
That's incredible and amazing for creating your ideal customer profile. I guess you're then, rather than that spray and pray methodology, right, of let's just go and find a load of people and chuck our avatar in front of them. It's like, actually, let's target people that are relevant to our audience. Yeah, that's genius.
Yeah. Like I always call it, I don't know what would be the UK equivalent, but I always call it the Wall Street Journal problem. Like, some CEO walks into a room and is like, I want you to get me a story in the Wall Street Journal. right? And then the marketers are like, but boss, you told us you want to target these people. They don't read the Wall Street Journal. Well, me and my buddies who golf together, we read the Wall Street Journal. So that's where I want you to get it, right? And now you can bring data to that conversation. You can be like, well, you said you want to target these groups. Here's what percentage of them, you know, pay attention to these publications. And the Wall Street Journal is 5%. And here's this, whatever, industry publication that's 25%. You sure you want to put more budget against this one than that one?
So, Rand, is this a monthly subscription or is this a yearly fee, or how does it work?
We have 3 types. So people can subscribe for like just a week, non-recurring billing, just to like heavy use for a week. We have a monthly subscription and we have an annual subscription.
Nice. And so, Rand, it's amazing that just with 2 businesses there, and I dare say it as well, I've seen from LinkedIn and others that there's been other ventures as well, you clearly have a great ability to grow online-based businesses. So for anyone listening, what's your secret? Because there's far too many people out there that are just too hesitant or nervous or worried about what if I do this? And actually they're stuck in this dead-end 9-to-5 job. They hate it. They're stuck on the hamster wheel. They don't know how to get out. And then they hear someone like you on our show and they go, that's the kick up the bum I needed to go and make a difference. So for anyone listening, what's the Rand special sauce that allows you to go and make that leap?
It's ramen.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Ramen.
These dry noodles, you put them in boiling water. Yeah. That is not the secret. I just happen to really like ramen, but I will say, I think there's sort of 2 things that have been, I don't know if they're secret, but they're sort of the special and unique things that I've done relatively differently to other folks, other entrepreneurs I've seen out there, that I think work well and I would recommend to almost everyone. And those 2 are, number 1, before you build your business, build expertise in a space. So it could be very, very niche, right? But build your expertise and then help lots of people with the problem that you are now an expert in, and then build your network off of that. And from that process, right, you now have a group of people who pay attention to what you're doing, know you, like you, trust you on a subject. And so you have a ready audience that you can launch your product, service, you know, consulting business, whatever it is, to. And that's sort of a secret sauce, because I think so many early stage businesses, whatever they are, right? Whether it's someone offering a service or doing consulting or offering a product, they fail because they can't get enough customers or enough customers profitably to make their business survive, right? And so by building your network and your audience before you build your business, you can, really end around this challenging, frustrating problem. The second piece is as you are building your product, one of the things that I highly recommend is that you get some form of customer acquisition that sort of scales with decreasing friction. So like it works in a cycle. I'll explain what that means. So for example, I think it works well with an example. Let's say that your product is a podcast, right? So, you know, the 3 of us are launching our venture capital podcast or what have you. And so we set up the podcast, and what we want to do is have a system whereby each time we film and record an episode and publish it, we get more and more people to pay attention, right? Yep. So that we can essentially attract people who maybe will be subscribers to our channel, and then they'll help amplify and broadcast it to other people, and then we'll publish the full transcript on our website, and that'll rank well in Google, and then more people will link to it. And so now all of our content ranks a little better, and more people find our podcast and more of them subscribe, and we do conversion rate optimization to help the landing pages be more competitive, right? So we sort of built this like little cycle, and it doesn't matter how many tactics we're using. We could be, all we do is social media marketing, but we're really good at it. All we do is SEO and content, but we're really good at it. All we do is press and PR, but we're really good at that. Whatever tactics you've got, if you can build up this flywheel type mechanic where each time you do a thing, it gets a little easier, or you get better results each time, that is exactly what you want to do, right? So I do this with blogging, where I essentially, put out content, try and get more, try and write more interesting stuff, get more people to it, get more of them subscribed. And then the more people who subscribe, the easier it is to reach a bigger audience the next time I put out a post, right? So like each time I'm putting out a post, it's a lot of work, but I'm getting more results from each post I publish. And that's sort of the philosophy that I have behind, marketing and customer acquisition in general. It's tough to do. You can do it with advertising, but it's really tough to do. It works better with organic of some kind.
That flywheel concept, is that a generic business? I'm sure I was reading in an Amazon kind of Jeff Bezos book or something. I'm sure he mentioned something around a flywheel, but I guess that's a fairly general business concept that people can go and find out.
Yeah, so there was a book in the early, I think late 90s or early 2000s called Good to Great by Jim Collins, and it sort of popularized this idea of an internal flywheel at a business, and then I've sort of taken that and made it my own around marketing and customer acquisition. But I think the concept, you're right, is fairly broad.
Nice.
If you search for marketing flywheel, I think SparkToro ranks pretty well. So you'll find like the visuals and graphics, and
So the rumors say
blog post
apparently it works all right. Yeah.
yeah. I'm still semi decent at SEO.
So Rand, if you could, I mean, I know that we all want to change things that we've done, or might have regrets, or might not want to change anything. But if you could start the Rand Fishkin story again, would you change anything, and why would you change that?
Yeah, I mean, Lost and Founder is basically a big long list of things I would change, right? I think every chapter is essentially oh my God, why did I do it this way? Like, I should have done this. That being said, I think one of the biggest things I would do differently is, I wish when I had dropped out of college, Stokely, that I joined another startup or two, even a failed one, even one that like went terribly off the rails and, whatever, I wasn't paid well. I wish I had done that, because I think that the experience of seeing it from the inside, seeing how somebody else does it, seeing what works and doesn't, is just really powerful. And I think that doing it the way I did it, which was essentially I spent my first, 5-6 years as an entrepreneur, just having no freaking clue what I was doing. I think a lot of that could have been end-arounded by joining another company or two.
And that's perfectly takes me on to my next point, which is around mentorship and inspiration. Who's been your biggest inspiration and kind of someone that you look up to throughout your career?
Yeah. So there's a friend of mine who's just incredibly, ludicrously accomplished, and has been a mentor to me, has helped me throughout my career. His name's Dharmesh Shah. He's also an investor in SparkToro. Dharmesh is one of the two co-founders at HubSpot.
Okay.
And he and his wife Kirsten have been friends of ours for more than a decade now, and really sort of big presence in my life in a positive way. And it's sort of weird, right? Because I think in my early years, all my years at Moz, right, I wanted Moz to be like HubSpot. Like I wanted it to grow that big and have that many customers and get to an IPO and all those kinds of things. And I think the funny thing now is with SparkToro, I don't want to do that anymore, right? I want to build a small business in terms of number of employees, however, much revenue or profit or customers it gets, that's wonderful. But I'm no longer passionate about building a big business. And it's really great to see that Dharmesh, despite this like sort of new dream, is still very supportive and helpful on that front.
And that's amazing, right? Because actually you and Dharmesh for a time would have been going in exactly the same trajectory, and you can make that would be logical for you guys to rub shoulders together. But now, like you say, you've gone on a different path, yet still the true friendship has shone through, and it doesn't matter what you're doing. And that's, again, another takeaway for anyone, that yes, you can surround yourself with people that are on the same path, but if they choose to take a path, it doesn't mean that you still can't support each other.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what real friendship and love is, right? It's saying like, hey, your path might not be my path, but that doesn't mean I don't support you going there.
Yeah.
What is the reason why you don't want to grow a big business anymore? Is it purely because of you've seen it, you've done it already, and you feel like you've already achieved that goal, or you're just having too many staff, it's just too much responsibility? What is that reason? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it is very much about, I guess I want to say, avoiding the complexities of a larger organization in terms of especially internal politics and kind of the tribalism that happens as a company gets past, say, 50, 60 employees. And I don't know if you guys have experienced this, right? But essentially you get to a point in a business where not everyone knows everyone, and there's not sort of the personal level of trust. And so it becomes well, engineering is this, well, marketing is that, as opposed to, well, Nathan's this and Stokely is that, right? And I think as soon as that happens, right, once it becomes disassociated from the personal and the human, it's not really a challenge I'm interested in solving. Like, I would rather put my brain power and work toward other types of problems, customer problems, product problems, marketing problems, finance problems. Like, I'm happy to take those on, but people problems at scale, I think, frustrate me and sap energy from me. They don't get me excited, right? They make me want to stay in bed in the morning as opposed to like get out of bed and go solve it.
Well, we all start businesses because of a passion that we love, right?
Yeah.
And mine was like creating, and I'd never, no matter how big we grow or wherever we go in our direction, I'd never want to lose that. I'd never want to become just a manager of lots of people, because I wouldn't enjoy that. And I think that's why I like the CEO of Gymshark. Do you know Gymshark?
I don't know.
Like a sports clothing brand. About a few years ago, he stepped down from CEO and stepped back into a creative role because that's what he enjoyed. Just employed, his COO or CFO was now the CEO, just because he missed that. As a CEO, you're very much pulling all the strings and not doing the thing you love anymore, which is a shame. So I do very much see your point.
Yeah. I think one of the chapters in Lost and Founders is called Self-Awareness is a Superpower. And I think this ability, right, to recognize in yourself what makes you what brings you energy and what gets you excited and what holds your interest and what sort of saps energy from you and makes you, just want to sit and watch TV, right? Instead of working on your business, like, oh, I'll do anything to avoid these kinds of problems. As an entrepreneur, you don't have to follow a path that takes you down these roads of doing things you don't want to do. Like, you get to design the business in such a way where you can avoid those things, right? So if financial complexity is something you absolutely hate, you can build a crazy simple business. You're like, well, we charge one price point. It's the only thing we charge, and it all goes through this one credit card processor. And so all my data, all my financial stuff is just right there. That's all it is. I only have one credit card, so it's spending and income. Boom, right? So I don't know anything about finance, but I know I've got that solved at least. You can build a business that is, when you do those things, that make life more simple and easy for you, you might be missing out on opportunity. Like, maybe there is, if you offered 4 price points, maybe if you offered different packages and structures, maybe if you got more creative in your financial engineering, you could do better things with the business in terms of raw growth. You don't have to care about that. That doesn't have to be your North Star. Like, you get to decide what is most important to you. And one of the things I hate the most, I don't know if you've heard this term, but like in the United States, especially in venture capital world and startup world, there's a pejorative that's used to try and dismiss people who build businesses in a way that is structured to be most healthy and productive for them. It's called lifestyle business. Like, oh, you're adorable. Look at you with your cute lifestyle business. Run along, get out of here. You know, the big boys, the real players, they go for growth, raw financial growth or growth of users. That is all that matters to us. And we, you know, capitalists are the arbiters of what matters and what's important. Don't listen to that propaganda. Like that is just rich people trying to make you work hard so they can take tons of time off, right? Venture capitalists historically, you know, and famously take August and December off, and they, you know, say that they work hard, but their working hard is mostly like having coffees with people and outsourcing all the work that they don't like.
Annoyed a few people, right?
There are a few self-aware investors, right? And venture investors specifically who are like, oh man, this job is cake and I get paid 50 times what any of the entrepreneurs in my portfolio get paid. What's going on here? This is so weird, right? And then there's a bunch who are not self-aware who are like, I earned it.
And I'm interested, you talked about self-awareness a couple of times there. When it's time for Rand to hang up his boots and kind of stop the old entrepreneur piece, what do you want people to remember you by? When people talk about you when you're not in the room, what do you want people to say?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. I want to build a life where a lot of people, when they think of me, they think of someone who helped them, right? That could be personally, it could be professionally, it could be in you know, at scale, sort of like, oh, his ideas helped me or his example helped me or something, right? But I hope that, and I assume this is true for like every person, right? That they want their life to make things better for generations to come, right? So people who, whatever, join the marketing field or the entrepreneurship world or the planet in general, or, that their life is somehow slightly better, at least because I was here, right? And because of something I did. And yeah, that's a hard thing to live up to.
That's a nice purpose. But like you say, sometimes with such a big goal, and that's another thing, I guess, for entrepreneurs listening, they set their big goals. And like you say, you've got personal goals, you've got business goals, but actually that's one that could probably never be fulfilled. Or what you say, never be fulfilled. You won't know it's been fulfilled until you're not here, which is really weird, right? Because you'll never be able to hit that success. Oh, this is so nice. Everyone's talking about Rand in positive ways, changed my life, blah, blah, blah. Well, you won't know that because you won't be here to listen. No. So that must be a really strange kind of situation to be in.
Well, I think fundamentally, right, the idea of having a goal that can be fulfilled means that, you know, like you can accomplish it, and then what happens, right? Like what happens after that? Do you lose purpose? Are you just done? You sit in a rocking chair and smoke a pipe? I don't know that I have that that desire, right? I want to make my personal and professional life about the journey, not the destination, right? And so, I think, you know, from everything I've read, that's a sort of healthier way to think about goals, is to think about the long-term ongoing outcome. It can never be achieved, but you're always working toward it. And that gives you something that can inspire you for a very long period of time, as opposed to something where you, like Moz is a good example of this, right? Where the goal was sell for, you know, whatever, $300 million or more in order to meet the sort of venture investors, you know, capital requirements. And that was a success, and everything else is failure. And I don't know, if we had sold for 300 million or more, like, I guess I would have more money personally, but then I'd be looking for a new journey, right? And what would I be trying to accomplish? And yeah, so that, I think that piece is harder for me to say, that like minute goal versus the long-term journey. I have obviously, you know, short-term goals too, like I need to get SparkToro to profitability, right? We launched 2 months and 2 weeks ago. Like we got to get to profitability. I'm hoping to do that by the end of the year. It's a lot of work. It's a terrible time to try and build a business, right? Get people to subscribe to a new marketing tool during a global recession and a pandemic, but do your best.
Why not? Yeah.
Rand, so the final question for me is, if you were talking to yourself, a 16-year-old self, I know Nathan and I, we know a lot of young talents who are sort of around 16, 18, who want to start businesses. What would you tell them?
Man, I mean, I think that's awesome. I had no idea I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I'm sort of a very accidental one, but I do think, I think it really pays to question all the assumptions and the, I don't want to call it propaganda, but like question the environment that you're in and why you want to do something and what that's really about. I think that's a long journey for many folks, right? To be able to understand, why do I want to start a business? Is it because I want the freedom? Is it because I want the obligation and responsibility? Is it because I want the glory and the recognition or the money or something else, right? And if you can get to the core of understanding why that is, you can start to question it, which I think is also really healthy. Like in my early career, I wish I had questioned the reasons behind why I was doing what I was doing. I didn't do that nearly enough. And I think until I kind of woke up from that slumber of information that I'd been fed all my life and reading TechCrunch and watching all these other companies and worshiping these startup CEOs, I think I would have found a better path faster. So yeah, if you're young right now and you're looking to start a business, I would just relentlessly ask that question about why and try and discover in yourself what you really want out of life, and whether building a business in a certain way. I think entrepreneurship is wonderful, right? We need more new businesses desperately. I don't know about the UK, but the United States is at a 50-year low in terms of new businesses. Wow. Like there's never been as few new businesses created, even though we're supposedly in a, whatever startup.
Hey, that's not the story they spin you, right?
Right. Yeah. This is the problem, right? You got to look at, like, if you look at the census data, you're like, oh my God, we're just in this dearth of startups, and big businesses are dominating the economy. And of course, this is contributing to wealth inequality. So we need a lot more new businesses. I think that's a wonderful thing to start. But you have to ask why you're doing it and what you want to build, and whether the path that you're on is going toward the thing that will be rewarding for you personally.
And that is a perfect way to finish. I can't thank you enough for giving up your time to join us on the show today. It's a huge, huge honor to have you. And when I reached out, from one side, they kind of always been taught to shoot for the stars and you never know what happens. But I couldn't have expected you to reply and then be like, yeah, cool, let's do it. So huge, huge thank you. It's a real honor to have you on the show. I hope everyone listening has really enjoyed that as much as Stokely and I have. And next year when I'm back out in the States, COVID dependent, then let's go for ramen. That would be really cool.
Oh, sounds awesome. I can't wait. Guys, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Take care. See you again. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.